Hello, this is Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, President of Skinner Leadership Institute. We are thrilled by the partnership with the Progressive National Baptist Convention through its president, Dr. Timothy Stewart, in a life-sustaining vaccine education campaign. PNBC has long been known for its commitment to erasing systemic health disparities that have afflicted African Americans and continue to do so. Skinner Leadership Institute, the National African American Clergy Network, our co-conveners, Dr. Otis Moss Jr., Dr. T. DeWitt Smith Jr., and Values Partnership look forward to receiving the amazing results we know will come through this life-sustaining campaign carried out to the glory of God.
Progressive National Baptist Convention. Guess what? We are celebrating 60 years. 60 years. Can you believe it? So join us August the 3rd through the 5th, 2021. We will be celebrating our 60th year anniversary. The Progressive National Baptist Convention started as a movement reflecting the political, religious, and social climate of its time. And guess what? We are still in the fight for justice. We are our ancestors' dreams, and we stand on the shoulders of Reverend T.M. Chambers, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Prathia Hall, Dr. Gardner C. Taylor, Dr. Timothy Stewart. And guess what? We are needed now more than ever. So join us August the 3rd through the 5th, 2021 for the 60th anniversary of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. We look forward to seeing you there.
Good evening, my progressive family. Join me as we celebrate the women of Progressive and the tremendous contributions of women throughout the years as we celebrate Women's History Month. Women have always played a pivotal, a crucial, and an invaluable role in the struggle for equity and in the struggle for majority rule. And so we have come this far by faith because in part, the faith of our sisters and the faith of women. And so join the Progressive family, 28th of March, as we have a special feature of the outstanding women that will speak on this wonderful occasion. So to all the progressive sisters, keep up the good work as we continue to celebrate you now and always. God bless you.
And good afternoon and welcome to the Progressive National Baptist Women's Hour. We celebrate not only Women's History Month, but we celebrate all year round. We are excited, first of all, and we give honor and tribute to our president, President Timothy Stewart, your cabinet, and all of the officers, members of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I am excited, delighted, always ignited to be with my sisters in ministry, and certainly a brother who's been a champion for women in ministry. We are delighted to have with us today. Oh my goodness, Pastor Moore, Pastor Edie, Pastor Kane, and Pastor Marvin McMickle. And so we want to just start today and just ask the question, what does it mean to be progressive in ministry? I'm going to ask you, as you answer that question, to tell us where you're serving now and what does progressive mean for you at this stage of your ministry. Pastor Moore, let's begin with you.
So I am Pastor Moore, and I am the pastor of First Baptist Institutional Church in Detroit, where the church is approximately 104 years old in history as a congregation. When I think about the impact of women and progressive, as well as the potential of what the history has brought us, I would say that to be progressive is to stand firm first in the Word of God and to let God guide us and direct us as we continue to move forward. It is also important for us to begin to look at what are the needs in that local area which you serve, and to be a beacon of light to those who we encounter, and to offer ministry that is supportive to those that we reach out to in terms of missions projects and in terms of looking upon those who are in need, especially in a season that we are in right now.
And what a season we're in right now. Pastor Edie, you have a unique ministry. We are so happy to have you as part of the Progressive family. Tell us what you're doing, where you're serving, many places, if more than one, and what does it mean to be progressive for you?
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I am an associate minister at the St. Paul's Baptist Church in Philadelphia. And as you mentioned, I serve in several roles. So I'm a chaplain in the Level 1 Trauma Center here in Philadelphia, but I also serve as a death doula and a grief coach, grief doula in the city. And so I partner with people and congregations, especially congregations who are in process of bringing on a new pastor, have lost a pastor, helping them move through that season of grief so that they can welcome in a new pastor. It's often difficult when you lose a pastor, whether that pastor is, say, in the AME church, move to a new church, or in a Baptist church, they just, happen to move on, welcoming a new pastor, a new family in. So I usher people through their seasons of grief, whether that is through any kind of loss, including death. So that's kind of how I serve in the church and in the community. And I think that's progressive work, right? Yeah. So I think that work, I'll just use that as my framework for progressive work, progressive ministry, not just serving in the pulpit. I love to preach, right? But not just serving as minister who preaches in a pulpit, but looking at ministry through the lens of those who need us, not just those who are serving or coming to our building. And we know in this past year, no one was really able to come into the building, yet people were dying every day. So how can I be present and bring a word of hope, a word of encouragement, let people know that God is still with them in and through those tough times? So I think that was a progressive ministry, being able to walk with people in and through grief and death. And that's how I serve as a progressive woman in ministry.
Well, quite progressive. The nation's going to need you, not just Philadelphia, because there's so many transitions of grief, both with people physically dying, but certainly post-COVID, two pandemics, the racial pandemic and a COVID pandemic. So we're going to come back to that and talk more about that with you. I was on the front lines of 9/11, so I know about grief and post-traumatic stress, which is something we're going to talk about with the mental health of our ministries and our churches. So Dr. Dolores James Kane, so happy to have you as well, coming to us from Tampa today. You got that sunshine yellow on, so you're bright. Tell us what you're doing, what you're serving, where you're serving, and what does it mean to be progressive for you?
Actually, I serve here in Tampa, Florida, in a church in Lutz, Florida, which is like one street over. One side is Tampa, one side is Lutz. I pastor on the Lutz side of Tampa, maybe a half mile, maybe 2.5 miles from my house. Which is an awesome opportunity. The church is a planted church, 14 years old this May, and tremendous ministry, tremendous members. And for me, what it means to be a progressive minister, I've asked that question of other people. So I can tell you why no one's ever answered it. So I'm glad we're asking it.
Yes.
like, what do you tell somebody to say, why are you progressive? And I can tell you real clearly, I had to specify that for me.
Mm-hmm.
What it means to be progressive is being open to new challenges, being willing to stretch and grow, and being able to hear from God and hear from the nation and what's happening, having your pulse on social justice issues and what's going on with your personal membership and your entire community, being sensitive to African American issues and being real clear about who you are, being proud, unapologetically Black, unashamedly Christian. And so it's like knowing the message and proclaiming that message, whether people want to hear it or not,
Yeah.
that we must speak about social justice as Black men and women. We can't afford to say it's okay to mix the, the churches and then let's just all go home and, sing kumbaya. I think the Black church is essential to the
Yes.
health of this nation. And
Very-
I do believe that we have to be careful not to let anyone destroy the African American church. And to me, being progressive means you always realizing who you are, being proud of your heritage, and making sure you're meeting the needs of our people, both spiritually and communally as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Very, very well said. So unashamedly, unapologetically Black, and certainly we're unapologetically female. And so we have our male in here. I'm so glad you mentioned men and women who are progressive. Dr. Marvin McMickle, you have just been a champion, not just for women in ministry, but a champion of the faith, president of seminary, a pastor, have written so many works. I think when I first came to Judson Press, you had about 12 books out then, and I was just starting. But I remember picking up an encyclopedia of African Americans and faith leaders, and you have so well documented like the real history. Sometimes people tell the history, but they leave people out, but you really had documented it. And I was just so proud of the work you had done. So you've seen the span, you've been in progressive. How do you define progressive, and what are you doing right now?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for including me on this panel during Women's History Month. I couldn't be happier to be here as an ally of your aspirations. I've been a part of progressive since 1971.
Wow.
When I was with Bill Jones at Bethany Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York, when the emphasis then was largely on matters of combating racism, racial violence, and improving race relations. And when the other focus was on, the earlier question of tenure in office. You're progressive if you want to see the presidency evolve. You're progressive if you provide guidance on matters of civil rights. I think that today, to be progressive is to be much more than that. So I use a Galatians 3 model.
Okay.
26 and 20 through 29. In Christ, there's neither male nor female, neither slave nor free, neither Jew nor Gentile, and that you are progressive as you progress beyond that form of oppression which impacts you and become open to and an advocate for those forms of oppression that impact others.
Yes.
Jamie Eady is on this call. She wrote a dissertation at Colgate Rochester in which she said, and I repeated this many, many times, if the only thing that Black men want is freedom from racism, but not a willingness to engage in other struggles, then what they want is not liberation. What they want is privilege. And I don't want anybody to feel that their voice isn't being heard, that their aspirations are not being encouraged. So matters of race, matters of class, matters of gender, and increasingly matters of sexual orientation are what I think it means to be progressive. And if the only thing that PNBC wants to talk about is racism, but not sexism, not classism, and not homophobia, then I think we've ceased to be progressive.
Yes.
We've just become, another group.
Wow, thank you for that. That's very powerful. Thank you, Pastor Edie, for that wonderful dissertation. I remember standing on the stage of Hampton University the first time. I wasn't an officer yet, but they were giving women in ministry an hour to be able to say whatever you wanted to. Most of the time it was a lecture, but for the first time, someone whispered in my ear, "Why don't you preach?" And it was the changing, transforming time with the Hampton Ministers Conference. I think it was 80 years old at that particular time. So why is it so difficult? What's the point of why is it so difficult for us to move past oppression into freedom? Pastor Moore, I'm going to ask you that question. Why is it so hard for people to be progressive?
I would start by saying that oftentimes we do not have the confidence in ourselves that we are progressive. And I believe that we at times do not encourage it and encourage the opportunities that are available and before us. And when we begin to embrace each other and uplift each other, that's one area that we can help in being more progressive and moving past some of the things that hold us back, some of the roadblocks that hold us back. We also have to be about creating opportunity for each other. And so, one example of that is that this coming weekend, we have going on Black Women Count in celebration of National Women's Month. But in order to do that, we have reached back to younger women who may not always have the opportunities of doors being open for them. And so it's important for us to connect with each other, but also lift up and support each other in opportunities that may not always exist.
That's an awesome thing. So not only are we reaching back, but we're also standing on the shoulders. All of us are standing on the shoulders of some progressive women, Nannie Helen Burroughs, Prathia Hall Wynn, many women who are not physically with us any longer, but who certainly blazed the trail. So our theme today is progressive women maximizing our potential, persistent in faith, justice, and action. How are you persistent, Pastor Edie, Dr. Edie?
I want to add to what she said and then answer that question too. Is that okay?
Yeah, then let's get to that one. Yeah, please.
Okay. So I think another reason is that we are comfortable with the privileges that we receive, right? So whatever privilege I have where I am, if I run the risk of losing some of that privilege when I open the door to allowing other people equity. Right. So if I have everything on this table and I say, oh, you want me to allow other people to also eat off this table, that means I can't hoard what's on the table. So that's why I don't want everybody eating from the table. Even if what's on the table goes to waste, it's all mine. Right.
I'm gonna let Dr. Kane respond to that. How do you respond to privilege?
I think that is the key. I really do believe that reason why it was so hard and still is hard. We still have churches in Tampa that I can't preach from the pulpit. So the thing about that is that when you are an oppressed person already, and when you've been impoverished and had to suffer lack over centuries of time, and it's what you're used to, when you get the table, you want the whole table. Unfortunately, we got to get to the point of realizing that God provides a new table.
Amen.
Table in the presence of our enemies. And we can't hoard tables that don't belong to us anyway. But I do believe that the brothers had a hard time because it was the one place that men had respect and they were looked up to was the pulpit. And here comes the sisters, hedging in on that too. So I know why it was difficult. I just think we got to help them too. Let it go. You're going to get enough. God's not going to take you out.
All right, Pastor McMickle, you've been a scholar, you are a scholar and a practitioner. You've had the juxtaposition of both. You've had women on your staff, you've had women on your teams. What do you say to male privilege and how do you respond to that assumption?
I just finished another book almost entirely on this topic. The book is entitled, Let the Oppressed Go Free.
Yes. You
are in that book. Jamie Edie is in that book. I think what we have to do is understand what Dr. Kane just said about how men clung to their privilege in the church because they did not have much privilege in the broader society at one point in time. I think that is running thin now
Yeah.
because there are very few limits to African American male aspiration in 2021. You got African Americans functioning at almost every imaginable level. So to say that this is the only place that we have where we can function, I think will not cut it today.
Right.
No, I think that the real issue is, and I just want to name it, I think it's the persistence of sexism and gender bias.
Yes.
I think it is an unwillingness to view women as peers, and perhaps because they've never been exposed to a woman in a leadership position where they could win that level of affirmation and support. But I think for me, the best way to confront these kinds of things is not to get angry about it. It's not to overly react to it. It's to take them to the texts. This is why Galatians 3 is so important for me.
And I'm glad you used that text.
Yeah, this is Paul saying, whatever you were before you got here, Gentile, Jew, Roman, Nabatean, whatever you were before you got here, when you come here, these three walls of division come down, and there's no basis for preserving them. There is no male nor female, all are one. There is no Jew or Gentile, all are one. There is no slave nor free. So I say this, if you want to get into a fight, you try to talk a Black man into going back into slavery. He will say, no, that's done. There is no more slave nor free. My response is, all right, if you want 1/3 of Galatians 3:26 through 29, why don't you want the other 2/3?
Exactly.
You can't take the part of the verse that you like and leave the other part of the verse out. Demetrius Williams has a great book called An End to This Strife. His point is you can't oppose racism and support sexism from the same passage.
Exactly. I remember preaching about where do we go from here using Martin Luther King's book at Hampton. And it really was confronting the brothers. They were celebrating, now we have this woman on stage, but it was not yet equity. It was not equity in terms of, you're really my sister. You are the woman for the Women's Hour. And it took 26 years from that point to really receive equity in terms of leadership. So
just one last point, if I might, for the convention. I've been in the convention since 1971. We've not yet put a woman in succession to become president.
Correct.
Progressive will be progressive when it allows women to aspire by appointment as second vice president, first vice president, or president of the convention through the normal process,
right,
like you did at Hampton. And until we do that, then, you know, it's ceremonial, but it's not structural. And I want to see us become structural in our progressive position.
As long as we have a women's hour that's going on while the bigger hour is going on, it's ceremonial.
It's ceremonial.
So we have to. So let's talk about walls coming down. We're in the midst of a pandemic called COVID-19. We all witnessed the racial pandemic that really just came to the surface. We've lived it all of our lives. It wasn't until George Floyd's the knee on his neck that America really kind of saw what we was talking about. So one of the things of COVID is that walls have come down because people cannot be in the four walls of a church. And so technology becomes the great equalizer. How have you, as women in leadership, seized the moment to make technology your friend? I'm going to ask Dr. Kane first, please.
You know what? And I was the one who came kicking and screaming into it. So my church would always ask to stream, and I said no, because people won't come to church if you make it that convenient. Then comes COVID, and now it's necessary. But God had navigated circumstances where I had breached the wall and had put people in place to do that right on time. And so when we couldn't go to worship those 2 weeks, they allowed us, we always took a worship team in on Sunday, and we've been live ever since. So we never stopped worship going. And we opened up for actual service entries in October. So we have never stopped doing worship at our church.
Okay, Pastor Moore, what about yourself? I mean, because there really is no mega church when nobody can get inside.
No.
So technology becomes your friend. How have you used technology, Pastor Moore?
So at First Baptist, we already had technology in place. So we were offering services on YouTube as well as in person. So by the time that the pandemic had come about and the churches had to close, I will say that the first Sunday that the church was closed was also the first Sunday of my first anniversary at the church. So this was a very emotional moment.
So you'll remember this anniversary.
I remember this. I will never forget this anniversary because I had to preach to an empty congregation with only myself and technology in the building.
Mhm.
So evolving out of that, we do a number of things that engage technology. Our quarterly meetings are technology. We have done additional webinars. We had a conversation specifically on the pandemic and the disparities in the Black community. I sit in 48235 of Detroit, which has the highest positive percentage of COVID cases in the entire state of Michigan.
Wow.
And so the question becomes, what do you do? Because the church is not the building that you sit in, the church is us as people.
Yeah.
So the resources that have been available to us, we are now using technology to actually pay for utility bills that individuals who are facing shut-off notices. In addition to that, with tax foreclosures, based on the fact that you're losing your home due to back taxes. And so we have grants that have supplied financial assistance for that. So we use the technology in way in any capacity that you can think of. We exert that and we try to make sure that we expound upon that.
So you're really ahead of the game. You anticipated what might even happen. So you really were ahead of the game. So when COVID happened, you were already doing it. So, and using
I was already doing technology, yes.
Yeah.
When
So
COVID first started, and I just expanded on it over and over again with monthly women's ministry. And then it sparked.
Yeah.
And the membership themselves begin to say, well, can we do this? Can we do this? And so I would say that our entire ministry is virtual right now in every capacity of what it looks like. Even the children had ice cream socials.
I love it. I love it.
Yes,
Yes.
so it's been helpful because of the seed that had already been planted, but there was a push because I have a congregation that is mature in age, and so we actually had to do one-on-one. We had to ask grandchildren, go by grandma and help her get online so that she can at least see service on Sunday morning. So
Which has been awesome. Which has been awesome. So technology is not necessarily the strength when we come to you, Pastor Edie, in terms of having to help people through transition and mental health issues and being on a trauma ward. So what has changed for you during COVID? Because I'm sure it's accelerated and intensified in terms of your ministry. What have you had to do to make a change and to make a pivot, as they call it?
Yeah, definitely had to make a pivot. And it's not a strength, but it does allow some kind of touch. So in the peak of the pandemic, when we had people dying in the hospital every day and we were not allowing people indoors, we had to use the phone. We had to use iPads and technology to be the bridge between, Big Mama, Pop is dying and you can't be there. So I have to literally be in the room to hold their hand while you're on the screen and say they have just taken their last breath. And that's not ideal, but that is what we had to do in those moments. Yeah. And then I have to do a face-to-face with you or a Zoom face-to-face with you, for another 30 or 40 minutes to give you some kind of presence and to make sure that I'm looking at you, right? We begin to learn that while talking with our hands might not be ideal, but it does help when you are trying to let someone know that you're with them, moving close. That's why I move around a lot. It actually, the animation helps when you're trying to convey emotion to people. So that's why I actually move around a lot. But
we might have life and have it more abundantly.
Like letting people know that you're actually with them. So I learned that technology is not ideal, but when it's all you have, you use it. Helping families do rituals because they can't do a funeral. So coming up, using imagination, using this season to help people ignite their imagination. I know we can't do the funeral the way we would normally do it, but let's think about a legacy project that would be meaningful for you and your auntie. What did auntie love? Oh, she liked poetry. Let's get together at 7 p.m. on Saturday. Who was her favorite poet? Toni Morrison. Okay. Oh, she. Okay. Let's read the Toni Morrison book. We're going to read Song of Solomon tonight. We each like what was meaningful. So using technology to get people together in order to help move and usher them through those moments of trauma and grief and loss. I think we're able to do it. We are. It's not ideal, but we are able to.
We have to be creative, as we always are.
Be creative.
Which brings us to the point of the impact of COVID, not just on our congregations in terms of numbers, but in terms of mental health. And I'm concerned about mental health for the caregiver, as we are, those who are responsible for congregations and those who are around us. What do you do for your mental health strength? I remember being on the front lines of 9/11 for 60 days, doing nothing but grief counseling, holding the hands of police officers' families who were never found, hugging firefighters who were trying to find their brothers and sisters in the rubble, and they never did it. On the 20th anniversary, and I still have the images in my mind of those traumatic moments. There were people like the 9/11 operators who were Black women mainly on the phone with people as they were jumping to their death. So you can't just squash that. But as a leader, we have to do something to stay strong, to stay together. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to start with you, Pastor Edie, because you're on the front lines of trauma all the time. What do you do for your own sanity to keep it together?
First and foremost, I name what I'm feeling. I name my loss. And for all of us, right, we have had tremendous loss. So actually being able to give voice to what we've lost, because far too often society tells us to keep moving, to kind of push through it, as you mentioned. So actually pausing for a moment to name that we have had tremendous loss, not just in the form of someone died of COVID, but for me this past year, every death is kind of a COVID death because COVID is somewhere lingering in the background. But naming loss for police brutality, naming the loss and being able to connect with our emotion. Say you're angry. Like God is big enough to handle, our God is big enough to handle all of our emotion. So being able as a leader, especially faith leaders, to tap into the fact that you were hurting, that you were angry, that you were sad. So being able to pause for a moment and step away from whatever you believe your assignment is. God is big enough to hold your congregation together. So examining what it is that you need to do to step away.
Okay, so let me push you a little further. Yes. What do you do?
That's what I do. So I know that God is big enough to handle whatever my assignment is, so whether that is my ego, whether that is, oh, they need me. I know God can handle that. So Jamie,
push you a little further. Push you a little further.
Okay.
So what do you do for release? Let me ask.
What do I do for, what do I actually do for release?
Yes. Give me two things.
Okay. So, I break away from everybody. You can't talk to me. So I go away for solitude. And I'll give you this. I find things that make me laugh.
Okay, that's me too. I would go to comedy clubs, actually, when they're open. That's what I would do. Okay, Pastor McMickle, you've been a pastor, president. What do you do when you see your congregation falling apart? Now the world, in a sense, has been falling apart. What do you do for release, and how do you pastor people through a pandemic?
Well, the things that I do to get my mind off of where my mind tends to dwell, is I've got about 25 people that I play words with friends with.
Okay.
And so I do that diligently. And then I do crossword puzzles and jumbles and other things in the newspaper that allow my mind to remain focused, but not on my sorrows.
Awesome.
And then I do a Bible class on Friday mornings and a pastor's class on Tuesdays, which provides people an opportunity, not in a worship setting, but in a give and take setting, to just talk ourselves through whatever's going on in our collective lives. We have done a lot of funerals over the last few months. I've done a lot of graveside services. I've tried to comfort a lot of families who've lost loved ones. I don't try to, be stronger than I am in the face of death. So I try to empathize and be available. But I do have to get away.
All of you
those are
tapped
the
into
things that I
the
do to
humanity
get away.
piece, which is awesome. Dr. Thelma Adair, who's 100 years old, she's a Presbyterian leader, 100 years old, says she taps into Jeopardy to keep her mind focused and off of the trauma. But
Yeah.
that's what's kept her strong these 100 years. So we're so excited. Dr. Dolores James Kane, talk to us. What do you do? Let's look at your humanity, your femininity, your womanness. What do you need to do when you're leading others, but others may be falling apart?
I always have known I had to have my space. I'm a social worker. I have a master's in social work, and that means you're first take care of you before you can take care of anyone else. And being honest about where I am emotionally. So I do my self-assessments, but I personally love my family. So I'm constant contact with them, and we're a source of support every morning by text. We've been in and out of each other's homes and vacation together about 4 times last year, more than ever. Went home for Christmas. So just spending time with family and knowing, and 27 of my sisters and brothers, nieces and nephews had COVID at the same time.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I didn't have COVID, but
Right.
27 had COVID. And that was real traumatic for me.
Yeah.
Because I said, God, I know you wouldn't take out my whole family, which
Wow.
at one time, not all my siblings except one, was not everybody but one sister. And I have 8 siblings.
Wow, wow.
I
I can
think
see your
about-
family's all the way live and in living color. I can feel it. I can feel the energy,
Absolutely.
which is
And
great.
so spending time with that family is critical for me. Staying in touch with family, source of support. My brother's a pastor, so talking things through with him and sharing resources. Like I do Saturday, Sunday school online. So sharing that with him, we can switch that up. And doing that kind of thing, I do a word of the day from my congregation ever since COVID started. So that's also cathartic for me.
Wow. What's the word for today? What's today's word?
Today's word had to do with there is healing after this.
I love it. That's a good point there. Pastor Moore, you're the only woman Baptist pastor in your region, correct? One of a very few. So what do you do? Now 2 years in to your pastorate, what do you do for balance? Some will say fun, and that's not a bad word, but what do you do to keep it all together?
I walk.
Okay.
And I walk very early in the morning. So I am walking approximately 4 a.m. in the morning when the cars haven't started to
Yes.
run and the noise of the city has not waken up. I'm fortunate that there is a group of us that walk. That's the only time we see each other. That's the only time we communicate with each other is early in the morning, and we are walking. And so that's the time to talk to God. That's the time to release to God. That's the time to laugh. That's the time to cry. That's the time to talk with someone else on the track when I'm walking. That's the time to be by myself. So that's a very critical piece to me. And I really enjoy that time every morning walking. Another thing that I do is a prayer call. And I find that although that I lead that prayer call, I'm so inspired and relieved by those who take on different components of that prayer call and then begin to pray and ask God to release in me that space and time. The last thing I would piggyback on Dr. Dolores, I got to spend time with my family.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
I have 3 millennial age children, 25, 27, and 29.
Okay.
And my first and only grandson that'll be coming up on 3.
Oh, please. That's it. It's over. It's over.
It's over. So I, with intentionality, have a monthly family time with them. I have a son-in-law, the father of my, my grandson. And so the 5 of us get together. I just learned last month that my grandson know how to throw a ball down the lane, and so I was in heaven.
I know. I know.
hanging out with the family. And so that is a very important piece for me, for us to gather once a month, that no matter what was going on in our lives, that we can come together and just have a little fun, have a laugh or two every now and then. So
Exactly. I have two millennial sons, 27 and 29. So everybody moved
I
home at
remember
the
that.
beginning of COVID. So it was wonderful. You know, those two guys I'll go to war for. So we've had such a good time, and they still, you know, check in with me now, and I'm glad to see them on their path, but also glad that we are connected. So, you know, we're close to the end, but I want to just talk about legacy. You talked about it, Dr. Edie mentioned it about legacy. We stand on the shoulders of some of the women whose names I mentioned: Faithia Hall Wynn, Nanny Helen Burroughs, Ella Mitchell, all of these women who blazed the trail. Sadly, many of them are not with us now because they didn't have boundaries. Some of them died of age, of course, but some of them died of illness. And so for me, a passion in ministry is work-life balance. Really making sure we take time. We have retreats that are just for us, where we can just exhale. And I've started swimming, which is my thing now. I rediscovered swimming. I started swimming with the senior synchronized swim team. So I was like, I'm in love with water. But let's talk about what you want to leave. What would you want to be remembered for? We're working hard. We're now walking on the trails that have been blazed, so they've been paved, hopefully. What do you want to leave so that someone else can come in and take it to another level? And in answering that, what would you want to say to Progressive to make sure that we get there? So who would like to begin? I know it's a loaded question. What would you like to leave? And what would you like to say to Progressive to help women advance? If we're going to be the women, let's hear the theme again. Progressive women, maximizing our potential, being persistent in faith, justice, and action. What else do we need to have happen? I'm going to start with the man then. Pastor McMickle, you talked about making sure that we're not just ceremonial in terms of how we're dealing with women in ministry. What else? What do you want to be left alone for? And then what do you want to say to Progressive in terms of going forward?
I read something just yesterday that said the things you write will last 1,000 times longer than any word that you speak at a moment in time. And so one of the reasons I'm so passionate about writing and leaving books behind is that when I'm no longer able to speak or can't get somewhere, the books I've written, the lectures I've given and been recorded will speak for me. I was very intentional in this present book to speak to PNBC. There's a whole chapter on what does it mean to be a woman at the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I should have said, by the way, I also referenced Dr. Kane in that chapter. I want to leave them with the challenge that if the only thing they're going to work and fight against is racism, then they have not lived up to their potential.
Tell us the name of
the
your
world
book.
has moved on to other isms, but PNBC has not.
Okay.
And unless we are as passionate about the empowerment of women in our convention, then I don't think we are all that King would have meant for us to be when we first started, that Gardner Taylor meant for us to be when we first started, and that a series of our presidents have hoped that we would be, but there's always been a kind of a pulling back and a restraining from that. So I hope that my legacy is that at least I advocated for more inclusion.
Thank you. Tell us the name of your book again, please.
Let the Oppressed Go Free, Exploring Theologies of Liberation.
And the publisher is?
Judson Press.
Okay, you can find it wherever books are sold, online or in stores. Dr. Kane, tell us.
I would hope to leave behind this sense of there is no limit that a woman can accomplish, even in worlds where doors are shut, because we serve a great God that can do anything. I've watched God break down barriers for me. I didn't break them down. I didn't have to stand on no podium. God just, because I was willing, he shut things down. What I would say so I would say that to women, just stand your ground and know that God got you. And speak your piece. and realize that the big boss is pleased, and everybody else, they'll get with the program or die with it. The second thing, what I would leave for the convention here is this. We must determine that our convention look like we're not an ism again when it comes to sexism or racism or gender division. Here's the thing, when we get on that stage in any area we go to, I think they need to take a look every time to make sure that stage look like the membership. I do that even at my church. If you got men and women in that convention, your stage should be reflective of who you lead. Over and over again, make it, do it on purpose.
Right, on purpose,
to be inclusive.
Exactly, and not just ceremoniously. Just don't
Not
expect me to sit in the pulpit if we haven't done the work before we got into the pulpit.
Got it. Don't put a flower pot up there. Put somebody who really represents someone behind them.
All right, Pastor Edie, what are you hoping to leave, making your mark? And there are many, but what's one you would hope to leave? And what would you say to Progressive?
I think the one thing that I would want to leave would be that we seriously consider how we engage with our mental and emotional health as importantly as we engage our spiritual health. Because we are creating fractured beings.
Very well said.
That would be that my life said that I want us to work on creating whole beings.
Awesome. And what would you say to the denomination, to Progressive National Baptist?
Progressive, and likewise, that similar to what Dr. Kane said, that we create a stage for whole beings, and that stage represents everyone, and sort of examine all of the isms, like sex, all of gender identity, like all of the isms, the whole person, and that people can come representing all of who they are.
Awesome.
And so that would be it.
There's a hymn that says not in part, but the whole. So
Like
I think that's what we're saying right there. Not in part, but the whole. And Pastor Moore.
So I would say that it's important for our actions to speak louder than our words, that we believe in the word of God. We live out the word of God, but people need to see those actions that is very progressive in front of those in our local communities, regional areas of our convention, as well as the national level. I also think that I want to leave behind that I was a voice for those who did not have a voice, for those who were who hide it behind, because there is a mask at times. And so we see the physical mask of wearing the mask that for the pandemic, the mask of masquerades or whatever, but there's some inner mask that we don't actually display. And so I think that it's important for us to help those, or for me to be an example, that there is some inner hurt that had to be healed. There is some things that have been experienced, and that because I've experienced, I can help you journey in your experience as well. When I think about progressive, I think it's important for them to be diverse. If you're going to be progressive, you have to have diversity, whether it's male, female, whether it's young or old. And I think that because of those who have paved the way, such as Perthea Wynn, such as yourself, Dr. Sujay, and others in my local community, I was very much mentored by Dr. Wilma Johnson, as well as Dr. Didi Coleman. And so I even did my internship with Dr. Didi Coleman. And so when we talk about what progressive can do, and that is to be diverse, to look upon those women who are strong in their character, strong in their ministry, but yet also look upon those who are trying to grow and not leave them left to the side.
Awesome. Well, I would say, I hope let the work that I've done, let it speak for me. I just was able to get a grant from the Lilly Endowment, $1 million grant, to have 25 Black women pastors mentor 25 women who are newer in ministry for advancement and placement, to help place them intentionally in places, almost affirmative action for women in ministry, which means I hope that there's a day that we won't have to have a special grant, but that we'll have grants that can just enhance our ministries, not have to try to intentionally place someone somewhere. So I pray that The works I've done will speak for me, that I've not only opened doors and blazed trails, but I've allowed others to walk with me and on them. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation between these dynamic, progressive pastors and ministers. We hope that you've enjoyed this time with us. We hope that you don't leave us forever, but right now you have to leave here because we have to go somewhere. This is the end of the show, and it's been an awesome delight to have Dr. Marvin McMickle, to have Dr. Dolores James Kane, to have Dr. Jamie Eady, and Dr. Robin Moore. And I'm Reverend Dr. Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook. They call me Suje, and it is my pleasure to have hosted this time with you today. God bless you, and really, God bless America.
Amen.
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 Hello, this is Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, President of Skinner Leadership Institute. We are thrilled by the partnership with the Progressive National Baptist Convention through its president, Dr. Timothy Stewart, in a life-sustaining vaccine education campaign. PNBC has long been known for its commitment to erasing systemic health disparities that have afflicted African Americans and continue to do so. Skinner Leadership Institute, the National African American Clergy Network, our co-conveners, Dr. Otis Moss Jr., Dr. T. DeWitt Smith Jr., and Values Partnership look forward to receiving the amazing results we know will come through this life-sustaining campaign carried out to the glory of God.
Hey, Progressive National Baptist Convention, guess what? We are celebrating 60 years. 60 years, can you believe it? So join us August the 3rd through the 5th, 2021. We will be celebrating our 60th year anniversary. The Progressive National Baptist Convention started as a movement reflecting the political, religious, and social climate of its time. And guess what? We are still in the fight for justice. We are our ancestors' dreams, and we stand on the shoulders of Reverend T.M. Chambers, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Prathia Hall, Dr. Gardner C. Taylor, Dr. Timothy Stewart. And guess what? We are needed now more than ever. So join us August the 3rd through the 5th, 2021 for the 60th anniversary of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. We look forward to seeing you there.